Hillbilly Nation, killing it. Like some girl with a face tattoo, they call her General Lee. She's got stuff locked down.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Human Reaction. This is a very special episode. Tonight we are glad to be joined by our friend, supporter of the podcast, regular Discord contributor, Adam Thuen. You've been down in North Carolina assisting with some of the hurricane recovery. Before we get into all of that stuff, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and your background?
Okay, yeah. So I am a retired U.S. Army major in a special operations branch called Civil Affairs. So what that is, it's like the DoD wing that kind of deals with civilians on the battlefield. We can say it like that. So we do a lot of like humanitarian aid, disaster response type stuff. So a lot of training, coordinating with stuff like Department of State or any different nonprofit groups on the ground. That's what we did. I did during deployments and worked with the U.S. Army. So I had that as my career. Retired out of that, and then, became an academic for a while, got a PhD and all that. But my old crew, or at least people I met, started a nonprofit group where they formed what's called a Clean Water Corps. It's actually a subsidiary wing of the nonprofit Waves for Water, which was started by a guy named John Rose. So he was in Indonesia. Hope I got the story right. And there was a big tsunami there. So he just happened to be there surfing. So this guy's a surfer. And wanted to help, found out, he hooked up with a Sawyer at the time and was able to get a lot of like water filters in, which is our primary system. And so he met up with our chief, Rob McQueen, who's another major in the U.S. Army Civil Affairs, same branch. And yeah, he just got his band together. And so we sent the team down to Asheville.
And the nonprofit was Clean Water Corps?
Clean Water Corps is what we call ourselves. That's the team element of it, the action arm, if you will, the veteran action arm. And then Waves for Water is the parent organization.
Waves?
Waves for Water. So, yeah. Okay. Waves, FOR, water. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. How many of you guys went down there?
So we had 4 of us that went down there. So, yes, we had our chief, Janice, been very active in the Clean Water Corps, gone all over the place. Second, Patrick Baird, another great guy, former cavalry scout. Janice was our military intelligence, just so I get the backgrounds a little bit right. And then he's been in the tech, and he's been doing Clean Water Corps for a while. A guy named John Hotchkiss, which was a E8, retired E8, so that's a master sergeant, so pretty high rank in the enlisted, and then myself went down there. So it was the 4 of us.
Awesome. And you had a kind of an interesting story that happened as you were preparing to leave with some interesting interactions with people. Do you want to?
Sure. So that's one reason I wanted to reach out to you guys, because like I had just in the podcast last week or whatever 2 weeks ago, and we had gone to get a sandwich in between the break between the skiff, and Jake Bennett had met someone, I think, if we get the story right, met a guy named Cole at a concert, and he just waved and said hi when we were in the sandwich shop. And as I was leaving on the plane out to Bozeman, I got like the plane, I decided to go like one day. It was like, it's Sunday, I'm going tomorrow. And so I got on the plane and I got seated right next to Colt. And turns out he is a pilot. He works for, I think it's called Transmedic, formerly Summit Aviation here in Bozeman. And he was going out to go work somewhere, but he's from Western North Carolina. And so he has a whole network of friends, pilot buddies, and that's who we initially hooked up with, along with other people, went down there. So he was able to get us in touch with people that were working the effort, and we were able to plug in and get our stuff and systems out to people that needed it almost right away.
That's so cool. Like small world sort of.
Small world, so yeah. Very like there was no coincidences, right? Yeah. But it was kind of cool to see that. So that was why we got the info we needed, but again, I went to work immediately. So,
what was the scene like when you got down there?
So I mean, I flew into Atlanta and we drove up from there. So we got all our supplies in Atlanta because like when we got there, everything was still kind of touch and go with some stuff, especially as you went south. But as we were going north from Atlanta, you start to get to that Greenville, South Carolina area, you can start to see the damage pretty good. You start to see debris on the road. I mean, they got everything off the road, but you can just see the kind of damage going. Like we're talking like trees, big circumference, maybe 2 feet in diameter, like cracked over or whatever, right? So like big trees. That was already in Greenville. As you get to Asheville, you see more and more of the damage. And then as you get to northern Asheville, northeast and west of there, then you really saw how the water went. So We initially also hooked up with like some river guides, or river. I mean, they have like a loose organization that was really into the watershed. And so they told us that on the Wednesday, they had got 20 inches of rain, which kind of saturated the ground. And then on the Friday, they said that at least some areas for sure got 39 inches in 2 hours. And so if you know anything about the mountains out there, a lot of them are like granite, so it's hard rocks. There's not much going on. So it's just whipped down the mountain. And
Nothing to absorb.
Nothing to
water.
absorb, yeah.
Right.
So the watershed just went by, and I mean, there's a video I have where me looking at some of it, but like there was just vehicles in yards, like houses were gone, bridges were gone, and a lot of these places. And so, and then, you know, back up in some of these haulers or these other finger communities, like they were just cut off because they just couldn't get out. You know, the road was just destroyed. Another guy explained to us that, like, if you think of, and I saw a little bit of it, like think of here or in the north, we get like 4 feet of snow. Like that's how much silt was on the road. So they were taking excavators and buckets to like clear out the road to try get some of it open.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Let's take a look at that video. We've got it here.
Everybody, it's Adam with the CWC. As you can see, we're here in Burnsville. You can look at this creek.
Yeah, you can see like the cars in the back. They're kind of far back there, but you see the trucks upside down over there or whatever.
Debris everywhere. So this is what these towns are dealing with out here in Asheville. So all these mountain towns, these little finger communities, water came in and you can just see it just took out houses. There's a house behind us that's almost missing its foundation. So, I mean, a lot of devastation. So we're out here trying to help people. We'll go and find some people. Hopefully we can get them some clean water systems and help the recovery out.
I just want to note for people, you know, you're fresh off the plane from down there. You're wearing the exact same clothes. You just came straight here.
Yeah, I'm just here. I just wanted to keep it up. I thought about that on the way. I'm like, I better put the hat on.
Yeah,
I better put the hat on.
It's a good look.
If I go that way, people don't think it's not me.
Adam is also a believer in minimalism.
Minimalism.
I appreciate that.
So the other thing I just off shot there was like an empty grain, like a giant grain silo that had floated down the river and just was like sitting on the side of the road. That's where like I saw some National Guard. They were trying to like help clean up, but it was just like a lot of that kind of stuff. Just big, giant debris, cars, pieces of houses. And that creek, like the way you looked at it, looked pretty low. Not that there, that was Burnsville, but a little bit out west of Asheville, a place called Canton. Similar kind of creek, but think of it like 25 feet higher than that. So they're like train trestle bridges or whatever. Like you look up and there's debris on the top of like this. It was just massive amounts of water just flying through. So people in the way just had no chance, you know. So
do you have any idea of like a percentage of the population down there that's still cut off from services?
Still cut off from service. So, I mean, there's a few communities that I know, well, as far as like services go, a lot of like
any sort of contact, aid, whatever.
Like, let's say line of communication or like roads or some way to get out. So there's some towns when we were leaving that were still kind of like unaccessible by normal roads. Like there's a lot of decent air transportation, some overland vehicles that were getting to those communities. But as far as anything major, it was very hard to do. And so, you know, you can just think about any mountain town. Everybody's a mountain folks, like some of the valleys over. You know, it's hard to get in, but it was a very weird place because you would like one valley would be untouched and the next one over just devastated. It just depended on what the mountains were like and how the water flew down. So,
Wow.
So from our perspective, so far removed from the situation, it's tough to tell. There's a lot of rumors swirling that like FEMA's totally dropping the ball or like National Guard's like not doing enough or whatever. Right. Like what was your impression of like civilian efforts versus military government efforts? Like is it happening? Is it working down there or what's going on?
I got a lot to say about that. Hopefully I get it concise, but the first thing I'll say is it's really tough to tell what's true on the ground too. Like you'd hear all kinds of things, but FEMA was definitely a dirty word down there. And that's from everybody we talked to. And we had a network that was from your lefty liberals, and this is Asheville. Everybody knows anything about Asheville. It's even more left than Bozeman, I think, most of the way. Oh yeah, for sure. So like very crunchy kind of folks, them and all the way to the hillbillies were like FEMA was bad. And actually as you got more out of Asheville, like one of the first places we went, like I said, that pilot hooked us up. We were up at Avery County Airport, which is a little bit northeast of Asheville. And that had a lot of civilian efforts. So everything we dealt with that we saw, we were dealing with civilians. Like we had kind of hooked up with a group that was attempting, like they call them a community organized active in disasters, but it was like a proto concept. They had this idea that they would do this before any kind of natural disaster in other places. They were like trying to train people on this, and that happened where they live. Whoa. But this group had a network of river guides, and then we hooked up with a former general who was there kind of helping us out. And then he was partners with a guy who used to be a special forces guy who was kind of big in the community, like the Biltmore. You ever heard of Biltmore property down in Asheville? It's a big, beautiful community. So he helps like Delton manage that stuff. So like kind of like a more of a strategic eye view. And then we were kind of more of the tactical level, which is kind of classic on how the special ops kind of, so that's kind of like what we like it, where we get a little bit of tactical, a little bit of strategic level, but everybody was not happy with any kind of government response that I could see. I mean, we get asked up in Avery, they'd be like, "You guys aren't with FEMA, are you?" And be like, "Oh, no. You definitely had to like,
You need a badge, not FEMA.
Well, I mean, got that military vibe, so you'd have to like roll the sleeve, show the tat, like bring the cross out. You're like, no. We're one of you guys.
Yeah,
we're one of you guys.
And you get the accent when you're denying it too.
Yeah, yeah. So I apologize if my Appalachian comes out. It is but you get a lot of lore there too. So like again, the best lore story I had, like, all right, we were out there and then we hooked up with these people and we said, hey, we got to go to the next valley over. We got to build this road. And so we just started building the road. And then some FEMA guy came here. He wasn't even from here. He was like some African guy, didn't speak English at all. He said, "You can't build this road on this property." We said, "Yeah, we can." And we started digging. And then he jumped up on the bucket and he said, "No way." And so I grabbed my gun. I put it to his head. I said, "You better get off my property." And I said, "That's a fake story." That's what that is. That is not real. That is not a real story at all. So there was some of that going on.
You get a lot of that like clout chasing on hating FEMA, but the question that everyone's probably asking is it deserved, right? We got a lot of anecdotes. There's a lot of anxiety. There's like the high level meta anxiety going on with multiple hurricanes over a short period of time.
Sure.
Sending government money overseas while there are people on the ground suffering. There's like all those narratives.
Sure.
And the question I think most people are grappling with that aren't involved directly is there a case to be made that they're really screwing up, and what are the details we're seeing from the ground level of things not coming together?
Yeah, let me approach it this way. Like, I have to give a lot of credit to a lot of, and again, like I had mentioned it, but they were on the show last time in a negative way, and there were those people there. Like, I like to describe it, the knights showed up and some of the nobles showed up to get stuff done, but there was definitely some anti-knights and some anti-nobles, but more of the good people first. Like we met with one of the nights, we had dinner. Again, we were with the high level here. Like the guy ran, or like he was the air boss. So that's just basically the guy that's running all air operations out of this one airfield, not the one we were at, but a different one. He said they flew, and there was all nonprofit, all like not government affiliated guys. Everybody brought their own birds. They said they flew 7,500 sorties, which means birds and subtypes, so fixed wings or helicopter drops. So people came. He said he expected 6 helicopters. They got 33 from around the country to start running logistics out. So a lot of great people. I mean, it's their own stuff. Like they're not government affiliated in any way. A lot of veteran types folks. Again, there was a lot of ex-military people there. And again, river guides and just Hillbilly Nation themselves getting out, going overland and trying to get back to some of these people, trying to rescue people. He told us he pulled out 400 people, a lot of elderly, some people that with medical issues. Of course, body recovery, some of that going on. I mean, I'm sure people have heard the stats. So, but those guys were out there. Now, there was a pro-military presence that everybody was happy about, which is the Special Forces guys. They do search and rescue. So, 20th group, I can't remember if it was 20th or 19th group. They were out there from day one going for it. And they did have some of their own helic because they had to get in. So, I think usually they roll with like 160th. I don't know. I can't confirm that. I didn't see a 160th bird. They're usually pretty easy to see because they have like a giant like rod hanging out the front of their helicopters, because that's for refuel for like a longer mission. So if anybody ever seen what is it, Zero Dark 30, I think they pulled them out for that. But it's a distinct helicopter. It looks just like a Black Hawk, only this has a refueler on it. I didn't see any of those, but I did know SAR was out there. I saw some of those guys. Yeah.
Interesting.
What about the anti-knights and anti-nobles?
Yeah, so the anti-knights and anti-nobles. Again, like everybody's down there, especially as I talked about in a thing like the whole vet grift, which is, I'll take back a little bit. I saw so much good stuff from people that I want to like dial that back just a bit, but I also saw some awful.
What you're referring to is we reviewed a video of Tim Kennedy talking about it.
Yeah.
Who's kind of like a celebrity. He's a UFC fighter, veteran, special ops community guy, does lots of podcasts. And he's really well known. And he did like a promo video, did an interview saying how the government's putting themselves up in all these hotels and taking all the hotel space away from people on the ground, while the people on the, like himself, were sleeping in a van and really sacrificing to make this thing happen on the ground. And justifiably, there was some like, it's a photo op thing, right? And it's definitely, there's, and if I could, I'll steel man your old position. You tell me where that's either changed or whatever. That there's a certain amount of griftiness to that whole thing as well, right? Well, there's people on the ground trying to fundraise for their organization, see how great they are, how much sacrifice they are, because they want to show that they're using donor dollars well, so they can attract more donor dollars. I get that in that situation and scenario, and I think people should be not naive to that whole narrative.
Sure. I mean, like, even some of that video you just saw, like, at some point you have to describe what's going on. So you're like, oh, well, we got to take footage. We call B-roll or propos. That's what I call it. But like, you gotta like explain to people what's going on. So there's that version. And then when it crosses into the brand element of things, like one of the guy, and I'll even call him out a little negatively, like again, but at the same time, they did do things, right? And so I'll say this, like, if you can't do good things for the right reasons, at least do it for the wrong reasons. Right. You know what I mean? So there's something to be said for that. Right. But yeah, they're like people with their brand, like, like some guys have waited their whole life. Like, I thought I was in Baghdad walking around. Like, people had like army, like the gear queers were out in force, like, for sure. But it was so bad, like even the liberals were carrying guns. You know what I mean? Like they were strapping themselves, and there was some reason to do that. There were certainly reports of looting, certainly reports of other, the police. I mean, they're overwhelmed for sure. Yeah. But yeah, you had people that were like running their own fiefdom in some way. Like they took over a spot where there was some logistics. It was just chaos. They were more interested in like being Billy Badass than maybe what people need. Like, I know what people need. I'll give them what they need. Right. And we don't have to expand too much on there for all the reasons. But then you go down the road, Hillbilly Nation, killing it. Like some girl with a face tattoo, they call her General Lee. She's got stuff locked down. Yeah. She is killing it. Now put your stuff over there and we'll go ahead and do these things. And you talk to this person over here and do this. And like, well-oiled run machine, no affiliation, no military. I mean, hillbilly training.
Sure.
Right. Hillbilly Nation out in force was great stuff. So that was fantastic to watch.
So you're kind of seeing like there's like these overlays that happen, but the foundational ground is the people in the community in the area organizing to save their community, save their lives, save their property, and coordinating together across spontaneously, like on the ground, finding who can provide what services and then plugging them into the right places. And there's just like a natural hierarchy that will prop up in a given area to solve problems like that. Right. That's the beauty of free country, free people who are able to do that sort of thing. The question is the government getting in the way? And that's what I think a lot of people are kind of pointing to, is where maybe that story is not right, but maybe it's right in spirit, right? Maybe there was a confrontation. Maybe there just wasn't a gun pulled, or
maybe it wasn't a gun pulled. But I mean, the grand scheme of things, like what's supposed to be happening is there's supposed to be an incident commander appointed on scene and a big like the whole incident command system. That's how it works. So there's that piece of it where FEMA is the end state. Like if you remember, I think it's the BP oil spill or something like that. There was an incident commander for that entire effort. And you knew about it from the media. I mean, I'm talking about it right now. But down there, it didn't seem like that was true. I know there was incident commanders and stuff. In my personal opinion, I just think they were so bureaucratic and so ridiculous. Now, just too slow. And so everybody doesn't have to deal with that. Was so much faster. So there was that part of it. Right. I also think people may have a bad indication of what FEMA kind of is supposed to do. Like, yes, they're supposed to guide the incident command. They're also supposed to come in with a lot of financial support. Yeah. But they're also supposed to coordinate. So at the top of the ICS system, the National Guard is like basically called up, and they're working for, they call it Defense Support to Civil Authorities, DISCA. And so the issue that I kind of had, like looking around, like I know that you got some videos of some, and I saw a couple of military helicopters, but the amount of military helicopters that we have, I mean, we're talking about Asheville, North Carolina. Fort Campbell 101st is right outside Nashville. You have 82nd Airborne, that's right south of Raleigh and Fayetteville. Like those have massive combat aviation brigades and tons of air assets. Obviously, they weren't there in force because you would think they should be, and that's what I mean. Like people needed those things right away, and it didn't seem like they were getting those. They got a few cut assets, and then of course all the other stuff about the funding piece. So what's a real tragedy is most people there didn't have flood insurance. Yeah. And so now, like, they just don't have stuff. Like, it's gone. So I suspect a lot of people walk away. Well, FEMA, in theory, is supposed to come make them whole in some of these things, or at least they figure out a way to do that. And like when I left, they were talking about 750. You might be able to. That just ain't gonna get done. That ain't gonna get done. Like these people lost
the
everything.
Emergency cash program, like immediate cash on the ground. But apparently, it's like a Byzantine application process that takes time and difficulty to actually fill out.
Yeah.
And people are on the ground. They're like, I got to find water. I don't have time to fill out an application.
I don't have internet.
That's sort of
Yeah.
difficulty. And a lot of those structures exist for like sensible reasons. Like, so there's not fraud. Like the only way for government to fight fraud is paperwork. That's the only way you do it, right? I mean, because otherwise it's too big, too whatever to do that. Right. Now that's the oftentimes like the more communitarian or small government responses. Like, well, people on the ground are better at solving these problems, so we got to empower those guys because they can find the people on the ground who need it and make sure that it gets to the right places. That said, there's also that naivete that can go along with that because you get a lot of grifters and a lot of fraud on the nonprofit level. The other side of that is Haiti, where we pulled together this huge relief effort. It's a foreign country. It's a vassal state of the United States, and there's the stories there of abuse are legendary and massive in scale. So like, it's a very sticky, difficult kind of public policy, cultural, and then like practical problem to solve.
Right. So that's why it's interesting to be like our kind of group goes into, I mean, you need to find local connections. They're fixers, to use the language nobody likes, but like you find your local fixers and they're going to be the ones that are going to network you in and also point you to where you need to go. Like our system is unique, right? It's a specific thing. It's clean water filtration.
Yeah. I have the website up here.
Oh,
Is this the right website right here?
This is the website. Yeah. So that's you're going to watch this.
Well, I was just
promo?
playing. You could talk over it if you want.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen,
There we go.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I mean, like a lot of times what we've done is go to these places just don't have good water. So think of like they get their water from whatever local watering hole. There's cattle around. There's other stuff. It's mainly to filter out biologicals for the most part, particulates and biologicals. So the filters are like 0.1 microns, I think, and so all bacteria get filtered from that. A good chunk of viruses get filtered by that. I think some viruses can go down to like 0.02 microns, like at the COVID level. We don't even go into that. But
that's an airborne virus. I don't know if water viruses are bigger, maybe.
No, I mean, they can be small is what I mean. It's because it's like the protein capsule and there's different things. But so they can't really say they filter out all viruses, but they can filter out some. And of course, the particulates. The issue down in Asheville is you also had a lot of like toxic industrial chemical contamination because again, just whipping through houses and whipping through. I know by a town that really got hit, Swannanoa, there was a giant like plastic manufacturing thing. And so again, you hear the stories, but they were saying like cleaning up around there, like their boots were melting, like just because of the toxicity. So that's one reason that that one guy, that like one of the grifter folks that I've labeled a grifter, one of our fixers we met is actually right there. So we went in there. My chief, Janice, she's like all about 5. She comes up to me and like my shoulder here. So she's like 5'3". She's seen her fair share of alpha idiots, right? But this guy was coming in. He was trying to tell everybody he's from there. And actually, he's more about Leo in a second. He's actually from Big Timber, and he went down to Appalachian. He went native for sure.
Well,
I am from Appalachian now. But he was telling him like this whole area is contaminated. You guys need to like wear masks or do something. And I was told if I can get you wear a mask, then everybody will. And of course, COVID PTSD kicks in. It's like, no way that's going to happen. So he gets blown off like we got blown off because, we're telling him we're trying to get stuff on. They did have helicopters that they were running too, but he was being elaborate, trying to come up with these weird plans because he's got his own. And we're like, all right, well, screw this guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So we went out here and found Leo, and that's who fixed us up with some of the Hillbilly Nation and really got stuff out to people in that part, which is like directly east of Nashville, thereabouts.
So if I just get the story straight in my head, you're showing up with these buckets.
Yeah.
That
want to
go filter water for people, and you're just trying to find the people to get them to.
Yeah, so the system is actually kind of slick. So like most of these parts minus the Sawyer filter are available at any hardware store. So that syringe is a turkey baster, and that's what you use to clean it out.
Yeah.
Right? And so you just take a 5-gallon bucket, drill a hole, it's a 13/16 bit, and then we got these plastic parts that you can, again, people use them for other things. I couldn't tell you all the things, but you supposedly can buy them anywhere, and we do.
Moonshining?
Moonshining. Well, out there, maybe. That's why there's so many guns around.
What you do with it afterwards is your business.
So, and the other
okay.
thing was like the faucet filters. So same thing, they hook up to the faucet because what's going on there is a lot of people got their water shut off. And so they still were not turning on, like most of northern Nashville still had not had their water turned on. So by that time, toward the end, there was giant like potable water trucks coming in from all the major cities, and people knew where to get water at water distribution points, but they're talking about turning on the house water, but trusting that water right away, I wouldn't trust that water right away.
Right.
And we actually ended up looking up with some schools and delivered some systems. They were going to start digging their own wells because they didn't have water, but they were going to try to go back to school. Because again, you think about it for a couple seconds, people are starting to go back to work a little bit.
Yeah.
People got kids. I mean, they go to that school. So we hooked up with them. Actually, we had a couple test kits. I tested their water. They didn't have anything that we saw other than like we test like heavy metals, like see if our filters will work. I didn't see any pesticides, didn't see any lead. I didn't see any stuff like that. And so gave them a bunch of faucet filters and really like they've been doing a decent job of trying to test water and get information out to people. But a lot of like radio stations just became like 24/7 like update stations. And so I ended up talking to one of them to tell people about it. That's how we got hooked up with the school. They heard I was on the radio and they're like, hey, we want to check it out. So we went out to Canton. That was where we went in Canton.
Oh, cool.
Hooked up with.
So hold on real quick. So you did an interview with the radio station talking about what you were offering on the ground.
That's right.
And the schools reach out to you directly.
that's
and
right.
then you wind up going up to the school,
That's
hooking
right.
them up with these filters.
Correct.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Okay.
So
And that's the kind of charity that people love to see, right? They want to see people on the ground solving real problems for folks.
yeah.
Not high level, obviously you need the high level to figure
Sure.
out those sort of things. You need distribution systems like radio. You need the coordinator on the ground. But it ultimately comes down to boots and bringing real assets.
It was a fascinating. So the fun, I guess, as I think about it, the nice relationships you have with these like veterans like myself. You know, some of us still have training. I mean, we're military age male types, so I still do a little bit. But like down there, the church power is huge. But church power don't really necessarily have like the other skills, right? But what they did have is like support skills. So like meals, like they just cranking out. These churches just got together, cranking out meals, housing people, giving people like blanket, like all that kind of supplies. Like actually toward the end, and this is actually a charity to the American people, a lot of supplies, a lot of stuff. People at the end were just like, listen, I can't take any more stuff. Like don't bring any more stuff here. Some stuff they still needed, like generators and warm blankets. Like it's getting cold out there. Like I think 41 degrees some mornings. So it gets cold out in those mountains. I mean, it's real mountains if anybody's not been to Asheville. So that was the latest. Another big thing that was going on, Starlink was killing it out there. A lot of people got the Starlinks, and that was like the only communication people could have because cell service was sketchy. Not much going on with like, you couldn't guarantee you were able to talk on the phone and not have spotty stuff, especially as you left Asheville.
And tell me if you don't know, but the Starlink distribution stuff, I saw you turned it on for everybody who had the hardware, but like, how do you get the hardware?
Same how they got our buckets. They got on helicopter. So some of the helicopters
people just
are
brought Starlink like connectors and.
So yeah, the Starlink went out and they found fixers basically like we did, and then they hooked them up with Starlinks, and then they got into the logistical distribution network. Like some of these helicopters, they're like training helicopters. They're like they're a little bit wider than this table we're sitting on. I don't know if we can see in the shot, but either way, like as far as us apart, like two seaters and just loading up supplies. You watch these helicopters take off, like, oh boy, go get them, boy. But like that's the kind of stuff. And then you did have some bigger helicopters at some of the other areas, but for the most part, it was these tiny little birds, going out to these haulers out there and trying to see what's going on, getting reports like that. A lot of communication came from pilots because they're the only ones that really talked to them because before the Starlink could get up. And the other part is they didn't have power, so they need generators to run the Starlink. Right, so you have all this problems you're trying to solve, and like the information flow and stuff. So like as a guy there doing clean water, we also become information people, and that's kind of the old job that I used to have in the military. Anyway, you're kind of like linking up who needs to know what. Oh, you should talk. I know this person. You should talk to this person, and that way you can get linked up and get some good stuff done. So there was a lot of that going on too.
Was there any truth to the rumor that was going around? I think Elon even said it, that he was being blocked from being able to bring Starlink in for a little while. Like, do you know anything about that from your time down there?
I mean, I know when they anytime a VIP tour comes, they're going to block airspace because all the reasons. So like the president comes by and tours, they're going to do a helicopter tour. Ain't nobody going to be allowed next to that thing. And so I think that's kind of where some of it went. I did see that story. I think he did end up like contacting old Petey Pete or whatever, and they, worked it out, I guess. That's what I think that kind of ended like. But yeah, you had.
I mean Pete Buttigieg.
Booty juice.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So like,
Just want to make sure
I was like,
we're familiar.
what euphemism are you using right now?
PDP.
well, I didn't want to say booty juice, but I just did. So that guy.
That's fine. It's an adult show.
That guy. But yeah, I mean, like the government wise, like I saw guard out there, but there was like so much. I mean, it's chaos, right? But the most of the order came from not them, in my opinion. I don't remember seeing a cop, but the guard was out there, but they're not out there in much force. And so what really was weird to me, I did see some military aircraft, but not in force. Like they're not what you would think you would need during this event, especially given the circumstances, especially given it was getting colder, especially that, you know, there's elderly people out there, there's people that need care, there's people that need to get airlifted out, there's children, there's stuff like that. Like I personally feel like the sky should have been peppered with helicopters, but it just didn't seem to be the case.
Interesting.
Well, other than who we were working with, I guess.
Well, and I've heard like other stories that like guard or FEMA would be there, but they'd just be standing around, like not doing much. Is that part of the bureaucracy piece? So like they just don't have orders to go do anything, or what's the
I would
deal?
say probably, and not to mention they're not like, if people think of FEMA as like a ground tactical element, they're just not that. They're kind of a strategic element. Now they're supposed to become like, they're supposed to plug those guys in, right? So the way incident command works is like at that level, they call them strike team level or whatever. So strike team is their tactical language for the team that's going to do stuff. But those are always like local law enforcement, fire departments, and they're supposed to be plugging into a wider nonprofit volunteer network and plugging in strike teams and then helping plan. And so basically they usually have like, it's just like any business. Like you have your admin people, you have your financing people, you have plans, you have ops. So they have like this whole cycle that they deal with. They have a public affairs officer that's supposed to talk to people, which in my opinion, I didn't hear about it. So he must have not done a good job. You know what I mean? But like, so that's what they're supposed to do and then really shove resources down. But what it seemed to be mostly is I just think they're slow and they're trying to do too much assessing. Again, like we talked about, or maybe off the recording, like the government, to me, their main job is try not to get frauded, which like, okay, that's great. But like when time is of the essence, that's not necessarily like people want to get it right. But I mean, yeah, the supply might be overloaded here. Like, oh, we got more things than we need in this way and we got less things this way. But like speed, what mattered. I mean, you go days without water and power, like that starts to wear on you pretty fast, you know, sleeping in the ground. Some people didn't have shelter. You know what I mean? Like they're sleeping outside, like bivouacking or something. Like again, day after day, 10 days in, 15 days in. It's like these people need support. And I don't know when that top's messed up. It's rough. Like I said, I saw a lot of knights, I saw a lot of nobles. I didn't see any kings, right? I mean, the real king was there, and that's my shout out to Christianity because there was a lot of good people doing a lot of great stuff. Again, you just saw all kinds of amazing things people do and coincidences that aren't so coincidence if you're in that space. But as far as like the supposed authority, I don't know.
Yeah,
didn't seem like they were doing anything that affected us at our level. That's for sure.
Right.
And
I think this is like just to zoom out, like why is the government that way? Why do these things sort of things happen? It's the incentive structure, at least a part of it, right? It's philosophical, but it's also like the core incentive. You don't want to make a mistake because you're a bureaucrat, right? When you're a bureaucrat, your biggest liability are mistakes. Sure. And the people suffering on the ground, if they don't get got to, you're more removed from that, right? Yeah, I'm not obviously no military experience at all, but I have read, what's his name? Jocko Willick's book, Extreme Ownership. Have you heard of that? Familiar with that?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So his whole theory is like the military works the best when there's decentralized command on the ground with an overall like picture being set by someone strategic. Like the tactical group has a wide latitude of range of action. And, throughout the prosecution of the global war on terror, what he said is like the military works best when it's working this way. And that makes sense, right? That's totally sensible. That is obviously in his side of it, the Navy SEALs. Can that be made into FEMA, right? That's the question is, can FEMA get to the place where it is, I don't know if it's a policy reform question, if it's a leadership question or what, where decentralized command really becomes the thing on the ground to actually get real sources to people on the ground because the people on the ground are empowered to solve problems and the incentive structure is flipped. You didn't solve the problem, so therefore you're paying the price rather than a fear of being blamed for the problem.
Yeah,
Does that
well,
make sense?
like I said, the DISCA mission, the Defense Support of Civil Authority mission, is a National Guard and U.S. military, and they did get activated. It's not like they didn't get, Title 10 or whatever is usually called when they get active duty goods on ground or whatever. And so they should be dealing with the military as a thing. So to more of the Jocko point in like the military speak, it's like you give somebody a task and a purpose and move out, right? This is my task. This is why I'm doing it. Go get it done. Right. And you might get another task and purpose from higher, and then you feed them information. That's kind of how it works. Like, this is what I see. They synthesize it in their, intelligence. Because again, like you're looking at a soda straw at our level. You're like, all right, I can see this. I can see the hillbillies killing it. I can see some crazy stories, but like some grifters. I can see some great people, but like I can't see the whole picture.
Right.
And so that's something they're supposed to do, is synthesize that we call it common operating picture. And I just didn't get a sense that was getting done. And if it was getting done, it wasn't getting down to people. And where I was at that Avery County airport, like they should have had that for sure. And I'm sure they got some things from them info-wise. I know they did, but like as far as like an overview and like a really good, well-polished product, just didn't have it.
And that's crazy because they literally exist just to do that, right?
Well, that's what you think.
Their whole
That's what
thing
you
is,
think, right? Yeah.
And we have these disasters that happen every couple of years.
Yeah.
They get regular practice, assumably. Why is there such a huge gap between the obvious ideal and where they're at? Is the question. And is it just leadership, or is it a code, or is it whatever question? That's really, I mean,
All of it. I blame them all. I blame them all. I would fire them all.
Right. I
No
mean,
doubt about it.
But that's always the question. Is that this is the peril of our high information environment, right? A lot of people have moved on Hurricane Helene. This is 3 weeks out where we're going to be doing this, releasing this probably tomorrow. It's one of those. It's one of those challenging things. Like if we will see a problem, but then no one ever synthesizes like what is the solution here, and maybe the next administration can consider that, and hopefully like testimony like this can raise the overall IQ of the actual question of what do we do to actually make FEMA work for people rather than the current dynamic that's at stake.
Well, it's not lost on people there that the like again. So I think the estimates are like 100 billion or so to fix Asheville, maybe a little bit less, maybe like 40, 50 billion. Somebody can look that up. But there's not lost on the people that we just spent 180 in Ukraine and Israel. They're like, oh, they got money for Israel, but don't got money for us here at Asheville, right? Like they knew that was going on. And so when you hear the reports, you don't get 750. The FEMA can redeem themselves by making some of these people whole, and they do an aid package and maybe pull that money back. But they're not going to do that. Like that's not going to happen. Like you said, it's already gone. The zeitgeist. We're in the middle of election season,
right?
And so what's the next shiny object? And again, like, it was not lost on me there that the election was part of it. I think everybody there was sick of it, but things were still politicized. It was just one of those things.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, what were the narratives on the ground around sort of the conspiracy theories that are floating? Was everybody just so in the moment and focused on rendering aid to people that needed it that they couldn't even think about that stuff?
And that's the best part of, like, I love that about deployment too. Like, the mission is like, it's the highest thing that matters. Like, it's not about the spinning. It's about getting stuff done. Yeah, there's chatter and banter and, whatever we're talking about, or just kind of
the
joking
lithium
around.
mine and
yeah,
shit,
like
right?
lithium mine. I mean, there was like next to that Avery County Airport was one of it's not a lithium mine, but it's a part that goes into electronic batteries, and that sucker was 24/7, still up and running. So, yeah, those kind of things, like, definitely, like, yeah, there's hints of conspiracy, and the liberal types that we were hanging out with, they would make fun of it, right? And the hillbilly types would be like, yeah, FEMA, they want us to die, so like you get both ends of it, right? So it was just like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? So
Right.
Now the first contact we had, I walked in, they had like a Harris Walls sign. I'm like, oh my, here we go. Here we go. And it said Harris, obviously. I'm like, obviously. This guy's been around the last week and a half here. It's fucking destruction here. Ain't doing nothing.
Oh man. Well, I mean, speaking of it kind of falling out of the zeitgeist, like, I'm sure there are people who are connected to that community, spread all over the United States, all over the world, who are still paying attention to it because they have family and friends still in the thick of it. What can people do now to, like, be helpful instead of maybe just sending stuff or whatever? Like, what's the way that people can get involved?
I definitely think stuff is, that time has kind of passed. I think I mean, it's the cliche thing, but I think it's donating to some of these groups that are down there, or like even like somebody like Operation Airdrop or somebody like Clean Water Corps, like make it like, sending some money to, pay for some of the ops so we can do it again. Or, a lot of churches down there, like, again, the church power out, they came out in force and they were doing a hell of a lot of great stuff for a lot of people. So that's one thing. And to your point about people everywhere, like I was actually talking to a lady today who's at, might work with a consult with something else, but she's from like the part of Virginia just north of, kind of got that Tennessee, North Carolina, and then there's a little bit of Virginia, like way West Virginia, but not West Virginia. But she was from there, and she's like, yeah, I feel disconnected. Like I'm trying to, I guess I can donate money, but it feels so weird not to, like, they need it. Again, these communities are cut off. It's really hard to get logistics. Like even if you do have a road, it's, there's only so many trucks and there's so much demand for supply on some things. So it's hard.
Well, I think we plumbed it. That was pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Appreciate
Glad you let me talk to my stories.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for going down and doing the work.
Oh, yeah.
We
I appreciate it,
that.
gentlemen.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Help us fight internet censorship by liking, commenting, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with your friends. To find us around the internet, visit linktree.com/humanreactionpod. And remember, you mean Pete Buttigieg?
Booty juice.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So like,
Just want to make sure
I was like,
we're familiar.
what euphemism are you using right now?
PDP.
well, I didn't want to say booty juice, but I just did. So that
It's
guy.
fine. It's an adult show.
That guy.